Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Kids Church, Robertson Wesley United Church in Edmonton, Alberta. My name is Reverend Karen Bridges, and as always, it's so much fun to be here with you today. And today in Kids Church, we are going to explore one of the superheroes of the Bible, one of the Old Testament superheroes. So I hope if you are joining me that you will send me a message so I know who's here with me. That would be lovely, as always. But like I said, today I want to talk about one of the biblical superheroes, one of the characters that is so important to everything that happens and leads to where we are today. And so today we're going to focus on the origin story of Moses. That's right, Moses. In fact, this week we are going to explore Moses' story because Moses is such an important character. So Moses, like I said, is one of the superheroes of the Hebrew Bible, which is in the Old Testament. And there's an entire book in the Bible that's dedicated to the story of Moses. And that is the book of Exodus. Exodus, that's right. So the question is, where was Moses in the world when all of this happened? I thought I would give you a bit of history of where Moses was when all of this was going on so that the story makes a little bit more sense. So I brought with me a map. So this is probably backwards for you, but this is a map of Africa. And that is where Moses' story begins. Moses' story actually happened in Egypt. And I don't know if you can see where Egypt is, but Egypt is this blue little spot up at the top here. So the top of Africa was in Egypt. So Egypt is where the Hebrew people were when the story of Moses began. And now I'm going to show you a more detailed picture of Egypt. So this is Egypt here. This is just a little piece of the swath. And what's really interesting is that there is a river that runs through Egypt. Do you know what that river is? It's very important in the Bible. What river runs through Egypt that's very important in the Bible? It's the River Nile. The River Nile. So that's right. So it happened in Egypt. The River Nile, very important. The book in the Bible that Moses comes from is Exodus. And now I'm gonna read you one version of the story. This will be the kids' version of the story. So yeah, I'll do it this way so that you can see the pictures along with me. This comes from the Candle Bible. So this is the easy abridged version. So this is the story of Moses. This is not Moses. Many years later, after Jacob and Joseph and his brothers had died. Do you remember Joseph and his brothers who threw him in a pit, and then he ended up with a beautiful, colored coat, Technicolor color. That's who they're talking about there. So many years after Jacob and Joseph and his brothers had died, a new Pharaoh ruled Egypt. So what do we know about Egypt? Egypt is where the pyramids are, right? So this here is the Pharaoh. The Pharaoh is the ruler of Egypt. Now, this particular Pharaoh, he was cruel. He made Joseph's family build great temples. Joseph's family were also called Israelites, or the Hebrew people, the Israelites. And so here they all are making bricks so that they could create important temples and places. Pharaoh thought there were too many Israelites, so he was afraid, and he ordered his soldiers to go and get rid of a bunch of their baby boys. That's how cruel and mean this Pharaoh was. But one Hebrew woman, one Israelite, hid her baby in a basket, and she floated the basket in the river. Do you know who's in the basket? Pharaoh's daughter, she's rather nice looking. Pharaoh's daughter, the princess of Egypt, saw the baby in a basket and she loved him. So she took the Israelite baby back to her palace and she named him Moses. and then we're going to save the rest of the story. So, what we know is that the Pharaoh, who was really mean and who ruled Egypt, just think of the most awful, cranky, mean, hurtful ruler you can think of. That was the Pharaoh. So, like I said, we're telling you the origin story of Moses. So Moses was a Hebrew child, a baby that was born. And because the Pharaoh realized that there were a lot of babies, and then their population grew and grew, so there were tons and tons of Israelites in Egypt, and that made the Pharaoh very afraid. I don't know if you've ever heard or seen the movie A Bug's Life. In it, we see the grasshopper, Hopper, his name is, and the grasshopper controls what? All of the ants. Now, how many ants were there and how many grasshoppers were there in the movie? As I recall, there was only like a, handful or so grasshoppers and hundreds of ants. And what they learned in the story is that the evil grasshopper only had power when the ants didn't understand that when they worked together, they could defeat him, that they were stronger than he would ever be. And it's the same kind of thing for the Pharaoh. The Pharaoh realized if there were too many Hebrew people, too many Israelites, then they would take over and he wouldn't be in power anymore. And so his solution was to kill off the babies so they couldn't make more babies. It's an awful, awful thing, but that's what they did back then. So Moses' mom, when Moses was born, she hid her baby for 3 whole months, keeping him out of sight of any of the Pharaoh's guards or people. But it got to a point where Moses was getting too big and it was too hard to hide him. And so she decided that the best thing to do was to send him down the river in a basket and hope that someone would pick him up and save him, not realizing that he was a Hebrew child and maybe they would just assume that, he was an Egyptian. So we're going to make a basket for Moses. So I have with me 2 pieces of construction paper. And the first piece of construction paper I'm going to fold in half, and we're going to weave a basket, because back then they would have weaved a basket. Do you know where Moses' mom would have put Moses in the basket? What body of water did we learn about? That's right, the Nile River. River Nile. So what I'm going to do is, you see at the top here, this is where it splits. Where we folded the piece of paper, I am going to cut little strips, not all the way to the end. So I'm going to show this to you so you can see it. I'm going to cut just mostly to the end, so you see it's still attached. And I'm going to do that several times, and I'm going to try to make the width about the same. So the River Nile actually was used as a way to transport food and goods and things that people made to the cities from the towns. And so they would transport these things in baskets down the Nile River. And so Moses's mom thought this would be a smart way to kind of keep him hidden from everybody, because he would look like any other basket that might be carrying apples or maybe wood or maybe fish that people had caught. All right, so we have a piece of paper and you can see there's slits in it. The other piece of paper, I'm going to take the long way and I'm going to make strips about the same width as what I just did, but this time I'm going to cut them completely through. So I'm going to do that. I'm not cutting these very straight, but that's all right. And I chose brown and green to kind of blend in, because baskets back then usually were made of rope or twine that would have come from hair that they would have twisted into rope. The baskets, sometimes they use leaves off of trees that have been dried, or the reeds that were in the water. And so I'm gonna pretend like these are some of the reeds in the water, sticking out of the water. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna take this piece of paper and I'm gonna raise you up and tilt you down so you can see what it is I'm doing. There we go. All right, so we are going to weave this into a basket. So we're gonna start, first I'm gonna go through this first slit and under it, and then I'm gonna go over top of the next one, and then under. So you're kind of weaving it over and under. Oh, go under, and then I go over. And we want that to be fairly tight to the top. And then the next one we're gonna take, we're gonna do it the opposite way. We're gonna start under, and then we're gonna go over. So we're kind of making a checkered pattern. Under, over, under, and over. And then we go under. And then you want that to line up as well. So you can see on this side what's happening now. You want to push that up so that it's tight to the other one. See what I've done there? And if you look from behind, that's what it looks like. So we're going to keep doing that. This time we're going to start over and then go under. And we want to do that until we have gotten all the way across our piece of paper with all of the strips. So basically, when they would weave baskets, they did this to make them stronger, so that they would hold together. And if you ever go to Hawaii or Africa or Fiji, some places around the world, they still do this where they make the baskets and they weave them together. It's a great way to do it. So you can imagine how hard it would have been for Moses' mom to give up her baby boy, but she thought it was the only thing she could do to save him because she wanted him to be safe. And so she really did hope that whoever found Moses on the River Nile, that they would take care of him and that he would be safe and the Pharaoh wouldn't get to him. And as we heard in the story, that's exactly what happened. And who found Moses? I mean, the coolest part is that the person who found Moses was actually the Pharaoh's daughter. His own daughter decided to protect a child that he didn't want protected, which I think is part of the cool part of the story. Now, Moses wasn't anyone really that special at the time. He was just a baby. But for some reason, God wanted to protect him. And so, you know, his mom very smartly did what she could to help him, care for him as long as she could. And so when the Pharaoh's daughter found this baby in the water, in this basket, she just looked at the baby and knew she had to help. It's kind of like finding a little baby kitten or a little baby squirrel that's been hurt or something like that. And she figured out pretty quick that it was probably one of the Hebrew kids because she knew what her dad had said and what he was planning on doing. But she wasn't going to let that stop her. So she made sure that she found somebody that would be able to provide Moses with the needed milk because he was a baby. And she took care of him until he was older and could take care of himself. And we're going to find out later how important Moses became to the Pharaoh. Because the Pharaoh had no idea that this child was actually a Hebrew child, an Israelite. Which is, you know, pretty amazing when you think about it. All right. We're almost done with weaving our basket. All right. So there you go. We've weaved our basket. I am going to now kind of fold it up. And I'm going to glue, I'm going to use some tape just to hold the sides together so that it would be like what would happen. Or actually, you know what? Let's do something different. Let's fold it in a midpoint. make more of a basket so a baby could actually fit in it. Yeah, it's not working. All right. I'm gonna go back to my original plan. You can work on making this a better basket as well. But I'm gonna get a little tape there, hold the sides together. And I'm gonna fold down the top. And I'm gonna fold down the other side so that it looks more like a boat. All right, so we've got our basket, our woven basket. And now we gotta put Moses, this is my little baby Moses, this cute little Eeyore, baby Moses into the basket. Probably would have been covered up with some blankets. We'll cover Moses up in some blankies. And we will send Moses down the river until Pharaoh's daughter finds Moses. All right. So you remember, do you know what it is to be a slave? Do you know what it's like to be a slave? A slave is somebody who is told what to do by somebody in charge, and they don't have any choice about it. And often it's not very pleasant, and they're not treated well, and they're basically just used for their strength and their work. And this happens a lot in history. So the Hebrew people were slaves. So like I said, the story of Moses happens in the book of Exodus, which is actually the second book of the Bible. So if you look at the very beginning of the Bible, we start off with Genesis, where we hear the creation story, and then we move to Exodus. And Exodus is spelled E-X-O-D-U-S, Exodus. And in it, we have, in chapter 2, the birth and youth of Moses. And that's what we're going to listen to right now. So I'm going to give you a better translated version of what happened. Now, a man from the house of Levi went and married a Levite woman. The woman conceived and bore a son, and when she saw that he was a fine baby, she hid him for 3 months. When she could hide him no longer, she got a papyrus basket for him. So just kind of like the basket we made. So she made a basket for him, and she plastered it with bitumen and pitch. So kind of like tar, you know that black material that they use on the roads? She used that to make sure it was waterproof so that the baby was safe and it would float on the water going all the way down, and that it wouldn't get filled with water. She put the child in it and placed it among the reeds in the bank so that no one would see. And then his sister, so Moses' sister, stood at a distance to see what would happen to him. So mom didn't want the baby discovered, so sent Moses' sister, because the Pharaoh wasn't killing the women. He was only killing the baby boys. She watched, and what she saw was that the daughter of Pharaoh came down to have a bath in the river, because that's how they used to clean themselves. They didn't have showers like we do now. So she went down to the river to get clean, and while she and her attendants, because she's a princess, so she had attendants, they walked beside the river. And as she walked beside the river, she saw the basket among the reeds, and she sent her maid to bring it to her. When she opened up the basket, she saw the child, and he was crying. And she took pity on him. So she looked at him, she saw he was so sad, and she just wanted to help him. "This must be one of the Hebrew children," she said. Then his sister said to Pharaoh's daughter, "Shall I go and get you a nurse from the Hebrew women to nurse the child for you?" And Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Yes." So the girl went and called the child's mother. Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Take this child and nurse it for me, and I will give you money." So the woman took the child and nursed it. When the child grew up, she brought him to Pharaoh's daughter. And she took him as her son, and she named him Moses, because she said, "I drew him out of the water." So Moses means I drew you out of water. So this is the beginning part of Moses. And I said Moses is kind of like a superhero of the Bible, and this is kind of his origin stories. And so we all know that often our superheroes either lose their parents, get taken from their parents, are put through a real struggle of some sort, and then are protected for a while as they grow strong and prepare for what they are called to do. So we can keep that in mind as we move into this week. We're then going to hear what happens now that he's growing into a man and he's quite strong, and Pharaoh knows who he is but doesn't know who he really is, which always makes the story exciting. But what is going to happen? What is going to happen? What is God going to call Moses to do? And I know you know the other stories of things that Moses did. So you can read ahead if you'd like in Exodus, as I said, which is the book about Moses' life. And in the Bible, we hear Moses lives for a very, very long time, potentially 300 years, which is pretty incredible if you think about it. And when he was rescued, the nurse probably took care of him until he was about 6 or 7. And really, by the time children back then were about 8, they were responsible for a lot of things, and they had to go out and work. School wasn't quite what it is today. They learned from a kind of a tutor, or their parents would teach them. Moses would have got some teaching because he was in the palace and was part of the royal family at the time, because Pharaoh's daughter, the princess, decided to take care of him. So he was very fortunate that that happened, and that he was found in the water. And what was the water that Moses was on? The Nile. I encourage you to consider making food that looks like a basket. Some people who have shredded wheat, or maybe you have pretzels that you can put chocolate on to turn into a little basket for Moses, and then use a marshmallow to make Moses. Or you could even use like a fruit roll-up to wrap around a marshmallow to show that Moses has been wrapped up and then placed in the basket. But think about what it was like. And remember that the Pharaoh was a very, very nasty, mean ruler of Egypt, and made the Hebrew people who were his slaves work really, really, really hard. And it wasn't the best thing in the world. And so we're going to hear what God's going to do about that. But we'll hear about it on Wednesday. I will give you a bit more of the story. Like I said, this is a big story. It's a big book in the Bible. And this is kind of a superhero of the Hebrew people. So I hope as you go out today that you care for baby Moses in your basket that we weaved together. And know that God is with you, that we are not alone, and God loves you, and you are all missed and dearly cared for. I hope that you take care. I hope you have a really good day. It's great to see you, Sage, and everyone else who is joining today. Thanks so much, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye.